How's it going, everybody? Darby here with Gen AI University, joined by Rachel Woods, the CEO at DiviUp Agency, where she helps companies scale up their own agency using AI without losing the personal touch. I'm excited to have Rachel here on the show and as a keynote speaker, part of our Scale with AI Summit series, to share with you how she is helping agencies become unstoppable by leveraging AI to grow their business, again, without losing the personal touch. Rachel is here in Austin, Texas, and I've had the pleasure of meeting her a handful of times in person and can't wait to hear what she is going to be sharing with us today. So without further ado, let's dive on in.
Yeah, so we run DiviUp, which is an AI operations agency. I always joke the hardest part about that is not the AI side, it's the operations side. But people don't realize how much when you have unlimited time, unlimited effort, unlimited little AI bots and agents running around, like how much you can really solve operationally. And we work on that every day with our clients, and we focus on agencies mostly.
And what are you going to be sharing with us at the summit?
Yeah, so we basically developed this method we call the AI Playbooking method, where basically we take your SOPs or processes, and instead of people needing to do each of the steps, we teach AI agents how to do those steps. And there's a spectrum. You can do like full-on agents, or you can do simpler stuff, even just prompts and ChatGPT. But the main thing that I'll be talking through is how do you even start on that? How do you take your business processes and break it down into stuff that AI is good at so that you can hopefully start getting a bunch of work off your plate.
I can imagine, especially like a solo entrepreneur or agency with a really small team, this would be like even more highly leveraged. Who would you say ideally is going to get the most value out of something like this? If I'm already established, is it more for me, or who's this best for?
Even though our work is fully focused on agencies, all of our methods are completely applicable across any type of business. I would say if you run a service business or anything where traditionally you are limited by the number of hours you have in a day, AI is like the best thing that you could have possibly wished for in either your day-to-day work or growing your business, just because it really does solve that time constraint. Yeah, I would say applicable to anybody. And in terms of who I think it's the most out of this is anybody who's trying to do more, grow their business, or the complete opposite. Things are pretty figured out and you're trying to get to the place where you're spending less time on the mundane stuff. Yeah, if you want to get stuff off your plate and get AI to do it, this is what we think the easiest way to do it. All right. Today, I'm so excited to share our AI playbooking method. It's the thing that we're known for in our agency. But for this group, what I wanted to talk about was one specific use case of playbooking that helps you really start to think about scaling your business the way that you want, especially if you're in any type of service business. This can be a game changer as you start to hire and build out a team. We're talking about building AI playbooks to scale your business the way that you want. And the nickname of this talk is AKA how you can define all the hats, but not have to wear them, and how you can use AI to do that and be really on the cutting edge of this way of using AI. And I'm going to talk about what that is today. But the real goal is I want you to be part of the group that's using this as an advantage instead of waiting for it to become table stakes and fighting to catch up. So I assume that a lot of you guys watching are already using ChatGPT. You probably also have gotten a huge productivity boost already. Usually most people who are using AI on like a daily or weekly basis think that they're somewhere around 10 to 30% more productive. So hopefully you're already in that camp. But what I want to challenge you to think about is how to use AI to scale your impact even more. Do you already think you're 2 times more productive? Do you think you're 10 times more productive? Do you think you're 50 times more productive? Can you even fathom what it would take with AI to get you to the place of being 50 times more productive? And even can you think about being 500% more productive? These last four are really where a lot of people don't think is possible with AI, but the people who are really leaning in, this is what they are capturing. And so today, what I want to introduce you to is a few new concepts that will hopefully help you get to be in that group that's on the edge. And again, not fighting to catch up as everybody else deploys this in their business. Let's talk about scaling. What's the number one reason that scaling is so hard? So when you have enough demand for your service or your product and it's proven and you're just trying to grow, like what really is the thing that's in the way? I would argue it's pretty simple. It's just time. It's the fact that you don't have enough time to do everything that you need to do as you are scaling. You are essentially building the plane as you are flying it, and you are turning to your left side, and you're like, oh crap, we forgot to put in a seat and a seatbelt and all this stuff. That's the hard part about scaling. And the thing about AI is that we talk about AI as this productivity boost, which is great because that can help ease the pain of scaling, but you're still going to run into that time bottleneck unless you actually think about AI in a different way. And that's really the way that we think about it, which is that AI isn't just a way to save time, it's actually a way to create a system that essentially gives you unlimited time. So let me break this down. The people that are winning with AI aren't just automating or finding productivity gains here or there. What they're really doing is leaning in a lot further and doing what I consider to be delegating to AI. And when you actually learn to delegate to AI, and I like to put the big why up front of why you should listen to the rest of this talk, really when you start to think of AI as a entity that you can delegate to, where you can give it really clear instructions, tell it how to do work the way that you want work done, you can really, in your business, start to have a lot more control and be able to scale things in a way that I consider really having unlimited time. And that cycle is one that actually ends up compounding on itself. What it looks like is as you're building out your business and you identify different high value processes, if instead of waiting to either continue doing it yourself or having to go hire a team, train the team, manage the team, all that stuff, which is just slow, if instead you delegate to AI via what we call AI playbooks, then AI will continue executing the work, not taking any time from you. You can reinvest your time into developing and delegating the next process. And then essentially just rinse and repeat and do this over and over again. And that becomes this cycle for essentially unlimited time. And so today, what I want to talk about is how to apply that concept to one problem in particular we're going to talk about, which is scaling client management. I think a lot of this group either has an agency or consultancy, or you work with clients or customers in some way, and you want to deliver a good service, but it's hard to scale a really good service. And so we're going to talk about some of our most popular AI use cases in this bucket. But I do want to share that basically, the processes we're going to talk about in this playbooking method, it really does apply to almost any business process as long as it's codified or standardized enough that you could teach it to AI. So before we jump in, I just want to do a quick context on who I am, a little bit about where I'm coming from. I was actually in AI before it became cool, long before it became cool. I joke that I was a nerd that just became a cool nerd, but I was in Facebook's AI research team working with actually more like medium language models back in the day. That was pretty cool. Gave me exposure to this technology really early. And essentially, I started using, as they got larger, I started using them to scale business processes at my last company. It was really funny because this was before ChatGPT, and in our product, we didn't say it was AI. Instead, we actually called it Magic, or Auto Magic was actually the kind of product name for it. And only some of our customers caught on to the fact that it was AI. And after that company, I started talking about AI online. Crazy enough, this was like a month before ChatGPT came out, and all of our content online really exploded. And we got to get a lot of exposure, which was fantastic. And that led to us creating two businesses. Me and my business partner run an agency called DiviUp, where essentially we do the exact work I'm going to walk through today. And we specialize in helping professional service companies and agencies, so a lot of digital marketing agencies, essentially scale their team so their team feels like they have unlimited time without having to grow their headcount. And then we also run the AI Exchange, which is our community where we talk about and share all of this material and really just help people stay on the cutting edge of what you can do with AI in operations. And so I really do spend all of my time helping people use AI to unlock what I call this unlimited time cycle. So if you are somebody who is in the kind of phase of random acts of AI and you want to move into more operationalized AI, aka what I call AI operations, then this is really hopefully going to be a very helpful talk for you. What I want to cover today is two things. First, the skills, because I want to really help you guys understand the core concept of how you do this. And then we're going to talk about what the execution looks like. And again, I'm going to walk through a specific use case on how you can start using this if you're doing any sort of client management to start scaling your business in a way that really feels like it's scaling how you want. First, to talk about just the probably biggest concept that I find that people get wrong about AI. And it's that AI is amazing, right? But a lot of people really think about using AI for the things that they're bad at. They use it to basically get up to average for things like if you're not a lawyer, using it for legal stuff, contract review. If you're not a copywriter, using it for copywriting. If you're not XYZ, basically using it to become average at that thing. But if AI can make you average at the things that you're bad at, you're really missing the other side of the coin, which is that you can actually make AI good at the things that you are good at. Now, I want to break this down, and I promise this is the most technical that this talk is going to get, but I think it's really important. And people always comment that this is really an aha moment if you haven't thought about AI in this way before, which is that AI is literally designed to be average. So, if as you're using AI for any task, especially something you're good at, and you're like, AI is not good, it's really generic. That's because it was designed to be that way. The way the AI is created is it was trained on a huge data set of text and other information. And then whenever you put a prompt in, what it's been trained to do is basically predict what the most likely or most average response should be based on all of the data that it's trained on. And so this is just a fundamental concept of AI, which also means that if you were to give it a different data set to learn on, let's say a circle that's outside of kind of that massive average circle that it's learned, and hopefully this circle has your expertise, proprietary data, anything that makes it not the average and generic information that it already knows. But if you were to steer it over there and essentially teach it to learn the patterns of your expertise, then ideally you're going to get something that is predicting a response that's outside of average. And if you're good at stuff, hopefully better than average. And so this is really just how AI works, is the fact that it's going to give you back what it has learned from the data that you give it. So give it better data, you have more control to get it to give you better responses. If you're sitting here thinking, okay, but how do I teach it? How do I give it data? Is that technical? It's not. And that's what I think is so amazing about where we're at with this technology today. Trust me, this was not how it worked when I first started using this type of AI. But literally, anytime you're writing a prompt into ChatGPT, you are already teaching it how to essentially work off of a different set of data than the average. And what I want you to really think about through the rest of this is how can you be putting in better data that gives it something that's going to be a better result in return? Because even as AI gets better and better, this really is a fundamental truth. It's just like how AI works. And so this is going to be something that sticks around and you'll get even more leverage off of as the tech gets better. And yes, even when we get to AGI, so like super, super smart AI, it's still only going to be as good as the instructions that it's given or the data that it's trained on. So how do you do this? How do you teach AI? The first thing to think about, if you've heard the intern analogy, is that AI really is pretty similar to hiring a smart intern. So super capable, but it doesn't have a lot of context. And the more specific you are with your instructions, the better you're going to get in terms of response. So if you were hiring someone, you wouldn't just say, hey, write our marketing emails and hope for the best. Instead, you would give them maybe templates, examples, guidelines, context. You might tell them about more research on your customers, tons of stuff, all compiled together into basically a playbook of how, you want them to write marketing emails. And AI is the same way. Again, it only works as well as the instructions that you give it. And so we call basically our approach to creating those instructions and codifying what you want to teach AI, we call that playbooking. And so playbooking, at the end of the day, if I were to give a definition of it, is really how you can turn a manual process into something that AI can handle. And then once it's doing it systematically, so repeatedly, the same exact way every single time. And then it can also do it at essentially unlimited scale. So If you're not familiar with thinking about processes, you might not have heard of SOPs, but that'd be something really great to look into if you're looking for inspiration. Stands for Standard Operating Procedures. But if you're familiar with these, it's basically writing really clear instructions of, okay, here are all the things you're going to need. Then step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. Step 4, do this. Same thing that you're going to need in order to teach AI. And once you do that, you can actually have those steps be a lot more complex than what you might be using AI for right now. So let me make that more crystal clear. And I'm going to walk through really step by step. How do you do this? How do you make an AI playbook and what do they look like? So at a high level, it really takes 3 steps. First, you need to plan the process. Then you need to write AI instructions for each step of the process. And then once you get that running, you test, refine, and improve so it gets better over time. Talk about the first step, which is planning the process. I see people miss this all the time because we are a society, especially probably a lot of this group, a lot of people, entrepreneurs, beat to their own drummer. We want to jump in. We just want to go, right? But think of AI like building a really complex IKEA thing. The more basically complex of an outcome you want, or complex of a task, or if you want that dresser built, you're really going to regret not slowing down and making a plan or kind of thinking about the instructions and the approach. So if you want AI to do something more complex, spending a little bit of time up front, really planning out what you want it to do instead of jumping straight in to writing prompts will really serve you a lot. So if we're going to go bare bones though, at a minimum, what I would define is what is the goal of the process? What are the inputs that the AI needs? So what's the information that's going to vary each time? And then what does done look like? What does that output look like? And how would you define that? And then once you define these 3 things, the next step is to take the process and break it down and write out each step by step. So 1, 2, 3, etc. Then you'll end up with something like this. And this is a playbook outline template that I can share out. But basically, you'll really want to just break down exactly what that process is that you plan to teach to AI. So after you plan out the process, then you'll basically have an outline for what are the instructions or the things or tasks that you need to teach AI to do. And you can go through and do this step by step. So what this looks like is basically inside each step, where we start is we write out a clear plan of what we want it to do. So we'll write out if we're using an agent, we'll write out that we're going to use that agent and what things it'll take in. If we're using a prompt, we'll write out that prompt name and we'll put any other context there. But basically, you're planning out what are the different pieces that you want AI to do inside each step. And one thing that's useful to know is inside these steps, sometimes there are multiple sub-steps, like you still want to like break stuff out even more. But once you plan out how you're going to tackle each step, then each of these steps becomes one or more tasks for AI to actually do. Even if you're starting with something just like using prompts, what you can do is basically write really clear prompts for each step and store those in that document, in that playbook. We have a prompt method that we use called the master method that if you want access to it, we'll put the link in the kind of description below. But the main thing here is that as you're writing out these prompts, you want them to just be really clear on what are those steps that you want AI to do. Then once you have all those steps, you can either just continue running it as a prompt, or you can break it up into basically steps in an automation. So if you use a tool like Zapier, this is where you can plug in those different AI steps and have your playbook run step by step in an automation tool. Or, as I alluded to earlier, if you're using agents, so basically more complex ways to use AI, then that can be where you have an agent per step and set those up. And so that kind of depends on whatever tool you're using. But any of these 3 ways are going to be a really effective way to essentially take your process and for each step, write either a prompt or have a prompt that's put in an automation tool or use an agent to basically do that step. And once you've done all of that, you've essentially AI-ified your process. And so that really is all it takes. The last thing that I want to say is, as you're going through this, it's really tempting to get to the place where you're like, man, this prompt could just be a little bit better, or this automation isn't working quite right. We really encourage everybody that we work with to think about how do you get the most value out of the journey of building AI. So basically have kind of MVPs or minimum viable products or processes along the way, because ultimately if you wait until it's perfect, then you're never going to get the full value out of what you set up. And that kind of comes to the last step here, which is testing and refining those prompts and that process until you can improve it to get to the place where the AI is working really well. And so once you've gone through all of that, you essentially have an AI playbook. Now, we've talked about what the process looks like, but I imagine you might be sitting here and thinking, okay, cool. So I see some examples. I'm going to outline my process. I'm going to write prompts, etc. But how do I do something that's really like a real world use case? How do I break down a real problem that I'm having in my business or a process that I want to scale? So this is where I'm going to come back to that question of how can we use AI to scale client management, especially in the way that we want it to be done based on our own philosophies of how we want to be interacting with our clients. And we're going to walk through an example of that. When you're scaling client management with AI, the first thing you really have to do, again, back to the whole planning concept, is you want to get a clear picture of what you are even trying to scale in the first place. If you jump right in to thinking, okay, I want to start with meeting agendas, and then you just start writing prompts, you're going to run into a place where you have a lot of scattered AI stuff, and it's not part of a cohesive system that's actually helping you scale. So the first thing that we always do when we're looking at a problem is we map out what actually are all the different tasks or processes that are inside that problem. So, in scaling client management, some of the things that you might want are the ability to prepare comprehensive agendas, sending accurate meeting recaps to clients afterwards, adding any ad hoc tasks that came up on those calls into your project management tool, saving insights for later, for example, for building new strategies or upselling clients, monitoring for churn risk, because there's a lot of signals on these calls. You want to be paying attention. Sending regular updates in between calls, following up on open loops, especially if there's things you're waiting on from the client, proactively suggesting optimizations or new things the client could be doing QBRs, and the list goes on. There's just a lot of things within what would be an ideal set of client management processes. So once you map all this out and you get a really clear picture of what you might want to scale, what you can do is you can essentially find buckets of these tasks, which can be run all as one playbook or one cohesive process. And so for this, what we found in this example is that if you have a process where you're essentially writing the meeting recaps and then using that to do the tasks and then using that to find the insights, also using all that data to monitor the churn risk, that can be one process and one playbook. So that's what we're going to go after first. So to talk about the task, the way to think about this is really, if I could teach an intern on how to write the perfect client meeting recaps, add accurate tasks back to my project management tool, save insights of what the client's asking about, new goals in their business, et cetera, and monitoring for churn risk. If I could do that for every single client and I had unlimited time to do it, how would I do it? What would I want? And I want to pause here because this is actually a really interesting example, because you might be thinking at this point, I use an AI note taker and it writes recaps and those are fine. And that'd be great, because if you're happy with the quality of the recaps that you're getting out of an off the shelf tool, then you shouldn't be building any sort of custom process for that task, right? The way that you want it done already matches the way that the tools do it. But let's say you're somebody that you look at the AI meeting note takers recaps and you're like, and these aren't even close to what I would send to a client. And I can't imagine having it write the tasks to my task tool. It'd be absolute chaos. And I really have all these other things that I want to mine in terms of insights out of these calls. Then that would be the reason to go after doing a project like this. As you start to think about this process, what's the first step? The most unsexy answer I'm going to give you is that you really just need to standardize what you want. If you don't already have a process or a playbook, then you should standardize that, and that's your first step. But the little more sexy version of it is once you standardize it, then you can teach it to AI via one of those AI playbooks we're talking about. So I'm going to walk through just a little example of how we might do this. So first, the task that I might come up with is I want to take the meeting transcript and I want to analyze it and I want to write an internal recap. And I want to do this first because whenever I have the intern, this imaginary intern,
watching that meeting or at that meeting, I actually want them taking notes on a lot of things that we wouldn't actually share with the client. For example, what are maybe some touchy topics that were covered or questions that the client had that surprised our team? What were some tasks mentioned that we may or may not want to commit to? What was the vibe of the call? Are there any things that might have signaled churn risk? These are all things that we can actually codify into a process and have be part of an internal meeting recap. Then once we have that internal meeting recap, so one we wouldn't share with the client, we can write the one that we would share with the client. And this can be really a slimmed down and almost thought of as marketing of your services and how these meetings went. So talking about your wins, any main decisions made, action items, but really making this in your brand's kind of way of communicating. And then third, once you get those recaps generated, you might want to save them for later and then also automatically send that client-facing recap. You could decide to have a human review step first just to make sure. But ultimately, if these are written the way that you want them written, what we found is you can get it to the place where you don't really have to edit it that much as long as you're clear on your standards and your process. And then after that, you might have the AI essentially come up with what are the tasks that were mentioned in that meeting that actually align to the types of tasks we do as a business, and then auto add those to your PM tool using whatever tagging system, signees, time estimates, and whatever your process is for project management. If you design and define what that process is, you can get AI to completely do this for you. And this may seem basic, but again, a lot of different sub problems that you're going to run into in scaling your business, especially if you offer a service and have clients, a lot of those can be solved by plugging into different parts of a pretty simple client management system playbook like this. For example, if you have a lot of problems with scope creep, where clients are constantly asking for things that may be out of scope, but maybe you have account managers who are newer and aren't really sure where the line is, then that can be something that's actually automatically flagged and tagged in your internal recaps for your team to review before they actually commit to the task, and can be a good feedback loop with your team of what they should even be committing to or talking about on these calls. Another thing you can do to help with scaling is, let's say you need to boost retention and you're trying to make sure that you know the work that you're doing is good, but you feel like it's maybe not always getting communicated or landing with the client. Or a lot of us know that we work with our point of contact at the client, but really the person that's deciding on the budget is their boss. And so if you can essentially design your client-facing meeting recaps to be a form of marketing of all the stuff that you are doing for that client, that can be something that's really easy for that person to copy and paste to their boss, or even just have a really easy visual cue of, wow, this is all the stuff that my consultant or agency is doing for me. Another example of where you can add things in are, let's say that you do quarterly business reviews, but they take forever. And you're like, what was this client wondering about? What are their goals again? What do we sell them on again? All this stuff. And you're just trying to remember. Or let's say you don't do them at all because they take so much time. As you have a system that's really analyzing all of your client touch points at this high quality way, what you can do is you can store those in somewhere that's AI accessible. An easy thing would be load all of these up into a Claude project or ChatGPT project and then chat with it. There's also other approaches. But basically, if you store all this stuff in one place, you can then use that to drive your QBR process, articulating again what you did and then what you want to do based on their goals they've communicated for the next quarter, super easy. The last thing that I'll mention is if all of us have this, or at least many teams, you get so caught up in the fact that you're on these calls and you're communicating with clients that you're like, oh crap, I forgot to put in the request for whatever task was mentioned on that call. Then you can, again, as you define, here's what tasks look like in our agency or in our team, you can actually have AI, again, add those tasks to your tool automatically following your process and procedure so that it's useful and it's just handled, which is amazing. At the end of this, you then have your first playbook, which either is something that you weren't maybe doing consistently, or if you were really writing this level of recaps and analysis, it might have been taking you 30 minutes per client per week to do, which now can be done automatically. And all you needed to do was write prompts for each of those steps. But that's not all. I want to walk through where this goes, because since you codified your process, you now have a system to support even more standardized scale. So we talk about, as you're scaling a business, one of the hardest parts is that you just don't have time to get everything into the level of structure and organization that you want. And so as you're using these, some of the benefits that you'll start to see is when you onboard new team members, first of all, they'll already be using this AI playbook when they do any of the steps we just talked about, recaps to clients. And so the quality of their work will already be at your standard. And those team members can actually study the AI playbook as well, because it's just words and instructions, so that they learn more about the why behind these recaps and they understand more about what your expectations are in the business. So it's a cool training tool. And then the other piece is, as you have other scaling headaches, then you can add in other steps that solve those problems. And I'm going to talk about one of those because this is really where, again, that cycle of unlimited time starts to get super exciting. So you already saved all the time on the recaps, but who here needs more case studies, right? Or more testimonials of how good your service is? I know it's so hard to create time for creating these. But if you already have this playbook that's analyzing all these meetings, what you can do is add another step at the end that is designed to flag case study moments. So if you describe, hey, we typically write case studies about blank, if the client mentions any of those things, write out those notes here. If not, just write no case study moments. But if you just run this automatically every single time when you end a meeting, then all of a sudden, when it comes to writing more case studies, you'll have a huge set of possible case studies. And then this is where you can add another playbook. So let's say monthly, what you want to do is have an AI go gather all those case study moments. So pull them from Notion or Google Docs or wherever you stored them. And then for each of them, actually go ahead and draft a case study. This is where you start to unlock a lot of efficiencies and scalability, because you start to define all these processes. And then once you define them, AI just runs them. And so let's say you build all this out and you're like, amazing, that works great. But now our mind is opened even more. What else could we be codifying? The answer, again, is every business process that can scale. It's systematized enough or can be systematized. You can basically get it to scale your way if you use AI by, again, just codifying the instructions of what you want it to do. I could flip through so many examples, but just to give one fun one that in case anybody here does a lot of content, this is one of my favorite use cases, is that you can take a transcript and have, anytime there's, let's say, a new sales call, a new keynote, etc., basically have it AI go through and identify different post ideas. And then for each idea, have it research more stuff online with a tool like Perplexity, for example. And then for each idea, add in the research and then draft a post. And then that could even be connected into, let's say, like a weekly news feed where an AI is identifying news articles, finding content that you already wrote, and then using that to draft other content. Then you can connect this to other workflows. Again, there's just so many things that once you start defining these playbooks, you have so much opportunity to scale your business your way, and it's pretty awesome. And so the key here, though, is that every time we delegated to AI and we saved time, we didn't just say, great, I just saved all that time. Instead, we took that time and we actually reinvested it into something else and delegated something new. Because if you start doing this, if you don't just reap the time savings, instead you reinvest them, then you really will get into this unlimited time cycle where you're continuously getting AI to do more and more for you, which will make scaling your business so much easier. And kind of the last thing I'll touch on today is the reason why I'm so passionate about this unlimited time concept is not only has it been a game changer for me, but I really do believe that it's the future of how every single business will be run and every job will be done. Because if the old way of doing work was that you developed expertise or learned how to do something, and then you did projects, and then you got a little bit more efficient, but you just did projects over and over and over again, then the new way is that you develop expertise and then you work on writing an AI playbook so that then AI goes and does those projects at scale, and you can reinvest that time into developing the next expertise or the next process that you want to delegate. And this, again, this unlimited time cycle, this is one that compounds over time. And so by the time that you've done 3 or 4 of these loops and somebody else hasn't, you're going to be able to accomplish so much more in your business that's going to be pretty hard to compete with. So be that group on the bottom. Now, last thing I'll leave with today is how to go take action. So I'm going to challenge everybody here, pick a process that's strategically smart to build an AI playbook for, then go through and outline the playbook and step by step AIify them, even if you're just writing prompts for each step and saving that in that document. And then as you start using it, continuously improve on those prompts so that it gets better and better over time, and use your freed up time to develop new playbooks. And that's how you're going to unlock unlimited time. If you do this, I would love for you to send me a note on LinkedIn or send me an email. And I'd love to hear about what you unlocked with using this playbook method. I always love hearing the stories. So you can get in touch with me on any of these places. These are different channels where I post content. I share a lot about AI operations. It's obviously my favorite topic, but I'd love to hear from you. And I hope this was super helpful. Thanks so much for having me.